Resumes stopped working about 15 years ago, but we didn't tell anybody. And they really stopped working after COVID. And there's a bunch of reasons. We can definitely get into it.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM Podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest, Steven Sopko. Now, Steven has quite the background as an executive, as a leader, as a manager, and, well, Steven, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, because you can probably do it better than me.
It has been kind of a story. So I started my career in the military, in the Air Force, where I was a contracting officer, so a negotiator for the government. And during that time, I opened the former Soviet Union to doing research agreements with the West. At the end of my military career, I shifted over and went into oil and gas. I was in purchasing in the military, so I decided to be purchasing in the civilian world. That lasted a couple of years, and then I started companies. I started a few companies, bought some, sold some, and then ended up at Dell, where I was responsible for public sector negotiations and proposals. That's anything for state and local government, healthcare, K-12, higher ed. So I was Dell for a few years and then took a break from that because I shifted from the buy side of the equation to the sell side, and I've been sell side ever since. I left Dell to be the chief operating officer at a game company that had been around for 25 years. That was an amazing experience. And then went back into entrepreneurship, starting companies that grew into bigger companies. I was employee number 7 at a company that now has 3,000 today. And I've always done that. I've gone back and forth between Fortune 100 entrepreneur, and that pendulum has swung back and forth for me. At the end of that time, I joined Oracle, the giant software company, and was responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa negotiations and business practices. Very large organization, 60 countries, supporting thousands of salespeople and billions in revenue. And that was a terrific job. Loved that, met some fantastic people. When that came to an end, I started a company that became very successful, Palisade Compliance. Palisade is a company that negotiates with Oracle when Oracle's customers have a software license issue. And Palisade has about 25% of the Fortune 500 as customers, which is unheard of for a tiny consulting firm. So that's been my experience over the last decade, is becoming an expert at figuring out how can mid-sized companies work with very large companies. And so I think that's probably a good set for us. Today, what I'm doing is when I exited Palisade Compliance still there, terrific company. If you're being audited by Oracle, you should talk to them. Shameless plug. But today, what I do is I left tech to go into commercial space. I live 16 miles from the pads. I wanted to get into commercial space.
Let's clarify that. Commercial space is in outer space, not commercial space is in commercial real estate, correct?
Or is it 10 by 10? You rent it by the month. Good point. Yes. But yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do that. And I did it for a year. And then what I discovered was the pace in aerospace and defense is very, very different from tech. And so I've gone back into tech. And so I'm back to working with companies as something called a growth advisor. I help companies really streamline out their sales process, because that is really the thing that is the most clogged for most mid-sized companies, mid-sized being above about 300-400 employees, especially when they're selling to the giants. And so if they're trying to sell to Amazon or Google, I'm the first person they call.
Now, remember, this is a family-friendly show as you talk about your growth advisement.
So I'm not going to go there, but yes, I'm.
So let's get started with, you're known for hot takes.
Sure.
And bold statements. So let's start with one that you've shared with me about resumes are dead.
Yes.
For the PM who is spending hours perfecting their resume with every metric, every certification, tailoring to the job description, what do you got to say to that?
It's sad because resumes stopped working about 15 years ago, but we didn't tell anybody. And they really stopped working after COVID. And there's a bunch of reasons. We can definitely get into it. The thing I would tell the person who's got a fantastic resume is your job will not come from the resume. Your job is going to come from a networking contact. And 99% of the people you meet networking cannot help you, but 100% of them know somebody who can. I've been around for a long time. I've interviewed thousands of people, hired hundreds, and I never, like 5 times in all of that, have I ever met somebody at a networking event and hired them. It's always been, you meet somebody at a networking event, they tell me your story, I get interested, I toss it over to my admin who calls you. That's the way the flow works. That's how jobs actually get found. The thing I say is, if you're finding a job through LinkedIn or Indeed, odds are it's a very mechanical process for them, and you're going to have minimal opportunity to negotiate. And frankly, most of the jobs don't exist. So I think that's one of the things. When I'm working with an executive coaching client, I tell them we're going to do the resume at the end of your interviewing or your job hunting process, not the beginning. So many people think the resume is the initiation of the process flow, and it's not. It can't be. All that resume is going to do is get you screened out. And we can talk about why, but I think that so for your audience, I would really recommend, the certifications are important. They're going to be important to the people who are hiring you. They're going to be important to your peers. But a list of letters behind your name on a resume, that's not the problem. It's the resume itself that's the problem. And so if you're sending out, I've got a client who sent out over 800 resumes, not a single call. And her resume is fantastic. She spent almost $3,000 making it perfect, but nobody uses them anymore.
To your point, I can speak personally from experience, because when me and my family first moved to Kentucky, before we were moving here, I figured out, I'm like, all right, I got to start networking to people in Kentucky because I know nobody.
Right.
So I started this is going back pre-COVID time. So I got on LinkedIn, searched recruiter, searched military recruiter, searched anybody that went to the schools I went to, sent a fairly formed message saying, hey, this is what we have in common. Would you like to talk?
Right.
And I hit the one person who, her son's name is Trevor and was going into Ranger Battalion at the time. So she had a soft spot for military named Trevor.
Right.
And she was the connector to everybody in town. And there's one thing you missed about the part of the connecting pieces. It's the follow-up.
Yeah.
It's how you use those introductions, because I had one email chain going probably with 10 different people because she did a mass email. Right. So I had 10 responses all on the one email chain. And after 2 or 3 emails, every single time I said, hey, let's hop on a call and talk.
Right.
And through that, got connected to someone else, and wound up at one of the top tier consulting firms in the country, had an offer in hand, and they paid for relocation, and I never once set foot in the state. And they sponsored my security clearance.
Which I think it really goes to show, if you have the courage to reach out, and if you have the courage to sustain the effort, then people want to help you. We all do. We just need to know really what you want, because so many people who reach out to me for help, both as clients and as people I'm mentoring through their career who used to work for me, my first question is not, what job do you want? My first question is, what do you want to achieve? What are you trying to do? Do you want to lead people? Do you want to dive into a technology? Do you want to travel internationally? What do you want to do? And then we work backwards from that. And I think that you're right. Sustaining the effort is important. The other thing I would say is, if you go into this with a mindset of I need, you're screwed. It's not going to work.
Yep.
You've got to go into this with a mindset of, I bet you when you talk to her, the first thing you talked about was what being in a Ranger Battalion is going to be like for Trevor. You didn't talk about you. You talked about what she wanted to talk about.
I don't remember, honestly, but it's funny because I was just talking to this person this past weekend.
Right.
And she said she is a phenomenal recruiter. She's worked all over the place. And she said, you were probably one of 3 people that I talk to regularly that I'm not trying to recruit.
And I think that does open a door to a conversation about recruiters and the idea that 99% of the time, the recruiter isn't going to get you a job. You know, the thing that I would always use recruiters for is when I could not fill a position from my personal network, but recruiters are crazy expensive.
Well, they're also screeners.
They are,
because
they keep you from getting a lot of nonsense conversations. True.
Well,
very true.
But what I've found with recruiters a lot of the time too is I actually had this happen where it was a recruiter from a third party company reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it was a form message, but he didn't change. It was like one of those fill in the blanks, but he didn't change the context for things. So it read like English was not his first language. And I knew he was from the US somewhere just by looking at his profile. And I responded to him saying, hey, I'm not interested, but just if you're looking to attract professionals, which is what the role sounds like it is, you might want to act like a professional to start with and proofread your messages and make sure that you're targeting your audience the right way. Because if someone like me is a professional and you're trying to recruit me and I can't even read your sentence like in a coherent way, I have zero interest in pursuing a conversation with you. And do you know what the response I got was?
Crickets.
Nope. It was, I send out hundreds of messages a day. I can't take the time to proofread every one of them before I send it. And my first thought to that response was, well, if you're sending out hundreds of messages a day, you're copying and pasting, which means you've got to have your template. You got to at least spend a few minutes on your template. Going right back to that resume thing, we spend hours agonizing over every word in our resume to send it out. And we don't even, it's 15 seconds of somebody looking at it, if we're lucky.
If you're lucky. Yeah. And well, there's a common problem between the issue recruiters have, but also the issue with ATS, applicant tracking systems, and outsourced or offshored recruitment and resume screening, and now AI. And it all ties back to the job description. And the thing that I'm not very popular, another hot take, if you will, I said this on a call yesterday with a few hundred people who are transitioning out of the military, is that the common problem is not the technology. Technology is fantastic. Common problem is not the people offshore trying to figure out what you do. They're fantastic. It all roots down to the job description. And I have participated in dozens of job description exercises in my career, both for negotiators, for salespeople, for lawyers, for marketing people, etc. And it all comes down to politics inside the organization. I run Europe. My colleague runs North America. He and I hate each other, but we share a job code. What that means is now we need to agree on what the job description for that job code is. Well, I care deeply about being across 60 countries, maybe speaking more than one language, maybe having an understanding about how cross-border trade works in Europe. He doesn't care about any of that. So they fight with me, and we fight and we fight and we fight for weeks. What ends up in the job description is the crap that none of us cared enough about to fight anymore. And the reason that used to work is because I knew, fine, screw it. Whatever the job description says is immaterial. I'm going to get a stack of resumes. I'll go through and look for the one that makes sense. Well, these days, hiring managers don't get the stack of resumes anymore.
And everybody's tailoring their resume to the job description.
The job description.
So what you're looking for isn't even, so
Bingo.
you could have 200 people with the exact skill set you're looking for, but what's the one thing that every recruiter tells their applicants? If you have it and it's listed, put it in your resume, write it down in the dumbest way possible for the recruiter or person that's reading it to know that skill matches what was in the description.
But if the description isn't reliable, then all that effort is wasted. And so the only way you get to find out what the job really entails is by talking to people. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges. And part of this is generational. Baby boomers love talking to people. And so they talk to each other and they would figure out how the job gets done, what's the job, that sort of thing. Gen X, we hate talking to everybody. You know, if I could spend my entire life and just not talk to anyone, most of the executives these days are Gen Xers. And a lot of times we've been successful in spite of our generational bias. Millennials, by and large, they skew directionally. I mean, older millennials tend to map more to boomer, so their peer group, friends, that sort of thing. There's a lot of conversation and communication that goes on. Younger millennials tend to track more with younger generations, where now we've moved away from interpersonal communication and really more into platforms. And I think when we're thinking about how to get a job and how to network, think about the person you're talking to. Because case in point, the let's jump on a call works above a certain age. It doesn't work below a certain age. It just doesn't. It's a point of anxiety for a lot of people, especially people in a highly technical field. Typically, they are viewing those free flowing conversations, kind of like we're having right now, as threatening, as a menace. And so you won't always get what you're looking for. So a lot of times, especially when I'm working with, one of the things I do here in Florida is I'm a mentor for founders who are getting support through the University of Central Florida's business incubator. And so often I have to be the bridge between the older investor and the younger founder. And there's just a totally different way we communicate between generations that is much more marked. So when you're looking for a job and you're trying to network and you're reaching out, just realize the system is stacked against you, and odds are it's not you. So it's just a matter of, Trevor, to your point, you identify what you're trying to do, the people who can help you, you start doing outreach. And then the thing I would add is look for how you can add value first.
Yeah, and to that point, I know I've heard this story before that you've told it, but you have a story about a job description that you personally dealt with when you were writing one, and then the future of how it went down, don't you?
Oof. Yeah. Giant technology company who shall remain nameless. We had one of those exercises. In fact, that was one of the first times I went through the job description exercise and realized what a goat rodeo it is. And we fought and we fought and we fought, and we finally came out with a garbage job description that we knew humans would be involved with, and we just declared victory and walked away. And I always assumed that that exercise happened periodically, but it's so painful that it's a lot like jury duty. If you get summoned to a job description exercise, you find every way possible to get out of it. And so this is just a number of months ago. I was talking with somebody who was going for a job that was on one of my old teams at this big technology company. And I asked her, send me the job description you're going up against. And it was exactly what we'd written 19 years before. And that thing had been sitting there just malignant in the system all that time. And again, as the technology has changed, that job description went from being a speed bump to being a brick wall.
And I'm sure that the job description was just as relevant to the job today as it was 19 years ago when you wrote it.
Well, it's funny because and this is also part of sales. Sometimes you write something so vague and so general. Sure, it could cover a bunch of things, but I wouldn't want to sift through 1,000 people trying to figure out who could do it because it was so just weaselly worded that
And to that point,
yes.
now I'm targeting my resume to a job description that's 19 years old.
Yep.
That wasn't even relevant to the job in the first place.
Yeah, it's like when I was in school, we would get textbooks that said, "Someday, man, we'll land on the moon." It was yeah, that is the case. But I think that the thing to just take away from this is not that we're doomed. I think that the thing to take away from it is, if you are allocating your effort, your project managers, we allocate effort. You're going to allocate effort across your job hunt. If you're putting 60, 70% into the resume mechanism, it's a lot like saying, I'm funding my retirement with a lottery ticket, and I'm going to go every day and buy a lottery ticket, because the resume deal is all about luck. And honestly, if she hadn't had a son named Trevor going for his Ranger tab, you never would have heard from her. That's luck.
But the thing is it was luck that she was the one that responded.
Yep.
But it was initiative that pushed me through.
Exactly.
And I still talk to some of those connections 5 years later, 6 years later, and they're all people that I built that relationship with. So I can go a year without talking to one of them, and then I message one, and they say,
right
"What
there.
do you?" And they say, "What do you need?"
Right.
And they say, "What do you need? I want to help." Not, "What do you need? I'll listen to what you got to say, and if it's low effort, I'll help you."
Right. It's all about building a relationship. And I think that works both in the job hunt and in the jobs we're going to get and the jobs we're going to do. And so many of us are looking for a magical HR office in the sky that allocates roles. And that doesn't exist. Human resources or people operations or whatever they're calling themselves, they are there to manage the pool of people that exist. Quite often, the recruiting, the finding talent, the bringing talent in, that's outsourced because it's variable. Sometimes you're hiring a bunch of people, sometimes you're hiring nobody. So there's a cost factor to that for an HR organization, and they tend to outsource things that have a huge variable cost component.
Well,
AI now is going to eat most of that, where you don't really need to worry about hiring 6 people who are now your recruiters in your big company. You're going to outsource that, or you're going to start using AI, because most big companies get tons of resumes. And there is a bias that says we're going to get plenty of applicants. We don't need to go out and find the right people. And that's just pure laziness on the part of managers. If you're a manager, if you have people working for you and you don't have a pipeline in your head of the next person you want to hire from inside your company or outside, you're just moving names around. You're not leading, you're not managing. So the thing I really suggest, and I've been through this over and over again with everybody who's ever reported to me as a 3rd and 4th line manager, is if Cindy leaves, who's next? Who's coming in? Well, I don't know. I guess we just have to go and recruit. It's like, you realize recruiting takes months.
and then you've got to train someone and get them prepped.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to pause for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a Patreon for the show. That's where I ask the audience, to like, follow, subscribe, but this is where you can actually make a difference. And I'm not asking for handouts, because I have bonus content with every guest, including Steven, who is going to be giving us some actionable tips with his expertise and his knowledge, and some of the things he teaches his executives on when they pay him thousands of dollars to get his knowledge. And you'll get some of that for $5 a month for the drinking the Kool-Aid tier. There's also the low-hanging fruit tier, which is $1, which, sad to say, you don't get anything out of it other than you're helping support the show and helping me pay for all the overhead and things that I have to do. So if you like this and you want to get deeper in depth with, if you want to get more in depth with my guests, join, sign in, and listen to the postmortem interviews.
A little behind the scenes content.
Exactly. Well, it's the actionable stuff. It's the real questions. Some of the stuff that people literally pay you thousands of dollars to hear, and you're going to get it for $5 a month.
That's true. And not just from me, from all your guests.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's all the guests from the back catalog, is from starting of the show, not just from the announcement on.
Nice.
So let's shift gears to something else a little bit, because, I know that you've done a lot with hiring, firing, and there's the motto of hire slow, fire fast. And I've heard that a lot of people say it. But one of the things I've noticed is the longer you take to hire someone, the more opportunity that person's going to have, because if you're interested in them, odds are someone else is too. Why do we take 6 months to hire someone for a job that pays $150K a year and go through 8 interviews and work assignments and all these different things, when their credentials and their background speak for themselves? Why are we making them jump through hoops to say, yes, we want to pick you, when we already know we like you?
I'm going to give you the answer, but it's going to piss you off.
Well, I am disgruntled.
Okay. So 3 reasons. First, the job doesn't exist. Remember I said you're building a pipeline? A lot of times what they'll do is they'll pop a job out there, and they'll allocate a certain amount of overhead to keeping candidates just sort of tumbling around like in a rock polisher, And the idea is that when somebody goes on maternity leave, okay, maybe we reach in and we get one that we've been building up. So that's one reason. Reason 2, nobody hires slow and fires fast. We hire slow, we fire slower. So what that means is the hiring process is poisoned by the same inability to make decisions that makes it impossible for us to fire people. What that means is, by and large, managers all the way up to executives, the ones that survive tend to be the ones that don't have a decision that can be isolated and attacked. So they try to build consensus. There's this warm, fuzzy layer of sort of going back and forth, and very few people are willing to break out of a consensus and say, the hell with it, I'm hiring that person, or the hell with it, that person needs to go. When we're thinking about firing, usually what executives are doing is waiting until the next layoff. And then they take their opportunity to move people out who maybe they couldn't fire. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just not fit for the job anymore, or the job moved on, or frankly, there are too many people doing that job. So I think that the key is when you are in that trap, then the third reason it happens, honestly, is, one, it's part of pipelining. Two, it's a lack of decision-making culture at the company. But three, inside the company, there's not a consensus on what the job does. And so what that means is, when I was a kid, a friend of mine dropped a 60-pound bike rack on my back. It was awesome. So I'm in the hospital, and it was 3 days on, 3 days off for the doctors who worked on me. And one doctor would come in and put me in traction for 3 days. Then another doctor would come in and take me off traction, because what the hell's he doing in traction? That's bad. That went on for 2 weeks. 3 days on traction, 3 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off. This was in the golden era before malpractice lawsuits. And the same thing happens in the hiring process. What that means is if the job reports to more than one boss, everybody's matrix these days, or God help you, has multiple stakeholders, there's an ongoing argument about what is important in the job. And that just makes it take longer and longer. So somebody pops up and says, hey, I want to assess their ability to deploy this project management tool. Okay, great. We'll send them a test. Okay, we'll see how they do. Then somebody else comes in and says, well, I don't really care about their ability to use the tool. I want to talk about their ability to communicate. Okay, we'll schedule another round of interviews. And the people who are really suffering are the recruiters, because recruiters just bleed through the eyes with all of this nonsense. But the thing I would say is, if you're interviewing with a company, especially a smaller company, like sub 300-400 people, and they're putting you through this, if they're not just rock tumbling you, then it says something about the decision-making culture at that company. And especially if you're a PMP and you're going to be responsible for operational execution at that company, you may want to consider that when you're trying to think about it. If it's this hard for them to make a decision on hiring somebody to do a job they need done, how hard is it going to be for them to make a decision to tell the customer no about something?
Yeah, I sat in an interview. I had a job where looking back, I saw the red flags in the interview.
Yeah.
Because they were asking me questions, how I would react to certain situations. And they caveated that with, these are situations that we personally have encountered, and we want to know your reaction. And half the questions I looked at and I said, you're answering your failure in the question.
Yeah. Yep.
You're telling me where you failed before I even opened my mouth.
Well, and the thing is, we all need jobs. Well, I think that's the key. If you're not an entrepreneur, you're not going to go out on your own and start stuff, which is what I do. You need a job. And so the thing I tell people sometimes is, look, they rock tumble you, you rock tumble them. What I mean by that is, I have mad respect for the people who've worked for me who were always looking for their next role. They didn't necessarily take them, but if you come to work for me, we're not married. You're allowed to keep looking, to see if there's something better out there for you. And realistically, I have had to lay off a bunch of people in my career. I mean, hundreds. And, it pained me to do it. It still does to this day. But I expected them to understand it's just business. And your employer needs to understand it's just business, that you're still looking. And to your point, you're still keeping up those network contacts. You're not letting yourself be submerged. So many people, when they go to work for a Fortune 500 company, this is a lot of my executive clients, I ask, who do you regularly talk to that's from outside your company? Mm-hmm. And unless they're in sales, the answer is almost nobody. They exist in the bubble of their company. Well, guess what? That company is going to lay you off at some point. And if you haven't built bridges outside that bubble, you're screwed. But it's just business.
What you're talking about, I actually encountered this probably 3 months ago. One of the companies I worked for back in January of 24, they had mass layoffs, including me.
Right.
And then in 25, they had mass layoffs again. And when you work for a large organization, you get like 20 or 30, 40 people in your organization all connected on your LinkedIn. And then you start saying, well, my LinkedIn is half this company because everybody I talk to at work, I connect with.
Right.
And I said something to the guy about, yeah, it really sucks that half your LinkedIn is this company. And he's like, yeah, it really does. I didn't branch out. I was like, no, it doesn't suck that happened, because when all those layoffs were happening and all those people in your network were getting laid off, guess where they're going? New places. And
Right.
now your network is exponentially stronger because of those layoffs, because now you've got connections everywhere. And those are all people that you built personal relationships with.
That's a terrific observation. We do something very similar in sales, where if my customer goes to another company, that customer is an ambassador for the relationship we've built into that other company. Same thing with people in your network, if you keep up the network contact. And I think that's the key. So many people let things die down, and after a certain period of time, they think, oh, I can't reach out to them because then I'm just reaching out because I need something. So a few truisms that I should save this for the paid content because it's gold, Jerry, but it's just gold. But this,
I got that reference.
Oh yeah, thank you. So I worked with a couple guys from New Jersey. Seinfeld quotes and Bruce Springsteen were my life for 10 years. But if you think about it, it's always better to have anybody in your LinkedIn than not having them there. So if somebody's obsessing about, half my LinkedIn is have them. Mm-hmm. Then the next thing you're going to obsess about is, I haven't talked to that person in years. Well, when I left my startup, when you're in a startup, you are heads down doing that startup and you're not networking, you're selling. So I exited my startup and I realized my network is down to about 35 people, which for me is crazy. My network has always been hundreds.
That's for anybody. That's crazy.
That's it. So, but long story about why. But what I had to do was reach out to people I hadn't talked to in 15 years. And I made a list of 50 names. And I challenged myself and I said, I'm going to initiate contact with all these people. I need something. I haven't talked to them in forever. But I feel like we had a pretty good relationship back in the day. And it's probably worth it. And out of those 50, how many do you think responded? 49. Unfortunately, one had passed away. Every single person responded.
We build these things up in our head to be such a big deal. And I just saw a post actually the other day about this where someone was saying, there's nothing wrong with sending someone a message saying, hey, how you doing? Yeah. And in the vet community especially, that's like the most powerful message you can send someone is, how's it going? How you doing? I had someone call me the other day who I haven't talked to him in probably 3 or 4 months. And he's like, I haven't talked to you in a while. I wanted to see how you were doing. And when we frame the conversation to start with like that, very few people are going to say, buzz off, I haven't talked to you in forever. I don't remember you. I don't want to talk to you.
Right. And the thing I would really suggest for people is the main reason we use to not do it is because we need something. We want to wait until this magical moment when we don't need anything from people in our network. And remember, 99% of the people in your network can't help you anyway when you have an immediate short-term need, but they know somebody who can. So the thing I would say is, if you're going to reach out just to reach out, hey, just, reach out with a question. Hey, the last time we talked, you mentioned this. What happened with that? I'm just curious. It's been kind of keeping me awake at night.
Or look what they're up to and ask them something relevant to what they just posted about or what they've written about or what they're doing. How are your kids?
Yeah.
How are your kids? How old are they now?
Right.
We all see the evolution. If you've got friends with kids and you go 3 or 4 years without talking to them, it's like their kids go from 4 to teenagers overnight.
Well, and the thing I would say is be true to who you are. Now, if you are a person who, what's the old line from Men in Black? You with the FBI, are you joking? And Tommy Lee Jones is like, ma'am, we at the FBI do not have a sense of humor that we are aware of. If you would never reach out to people to find out how they're doing, don't reach out to people to find out how they're doing. It's not you. It's not who you are. But there's no harm in you reaching out to say, hey, I saw your team won. That's excellent. It must feel really good. Yeah. It's been a while since we caught up. Be genuine first, even if it's not warm. because I say this having worked with a lot of project managers and a lot of software auditors and a lot of engineers and a lot of aerospace people. Warmth is not a requirement for the job. And so if you suddenly show up like Dr. Phil, it's not genuine, and people's BS flag goes up fast, especially if they have a mental picture of you. Like, case in point, the people who worked with me early in my career have a mental picture of me as an incredibly, what's the proper word? I'll just call it uptight. I was just really super focused on results. And no matter how many bodies we had to leave at the base of the hill, we were going to get to the top of the hill. And so they have a mental picture of me. And that picture has evolved because the nice thing about social media, if you're genuine in your posting, people see you change over time. But if you're coming at somebody cold, think of who you were the last time they knew you. That's probably the person they're responding to now. And think about how you'll explain your evolution in a kind of, and this is, again, something to use AI for. Everybody asks, I know I'm supposed to be using AI, but I don't have any concrete use cases. Great. You're somebody I worked with 5 years ago. Here's their LinkedIn profile. I need to reach back out to them and have a conversation. Role play that with me. And
I even used AI to find out, am I considered influential or important in the industry of project management based off of my LinkedIn activity?
There you go.
Shocker, the answer is no.
But the thing is, you're asking the question. Now AI knows to plant your stuff. So I think it's a terrific thing, because there's a certain self-awareness that we're allowed to generate through AI that we can't get any other way.
I've used AI plenty of times where I've written about this extensively, about having difficult conversations. And there was a couple where I just didn't know how to bring it up, how to have the conversation. And my wife is usually the person I go to for the emotional intelligence portion of my brain, because I don't have it. But this was one of those things I just couldn't figure it out. So I just role played it with the AI tool of, hey, I need to have this conversation covering this topic. This is the background. And it gave me a really good script to kind of tailor it, make it more me, but it gave me the right approach to be able to have that conversation. And I think that's a lost art form, is the conversation.
Very true. I think if you use AI for that visualization, think about it. Now you've got something concrete in front of you proving the conversation can happen. Mm-hmm. And there's so much science around the power of visualization in achieving results. Well, use AI as a visualization tool, not a, what's the weather, in Italy tool. So
yeah, I've heard this before too. For a strategy for having those conversations is, you start off visualizing the conversation in the worst way it could possibly go.
Right.
You go in there in your head, have the conversation in your head of the other person, just 4-letter words all day long, every excuse, every name thrown at you, everything. And then after you're done, you take a break, and then you have that same conversation in the best possible way that it could ever go, with no profanity, no confrontation. Everybody's happy. Everybody leaves excited, everything. And you know what the truth is? It's going to land somewhere in the middle every time.
It's true.
Because though you covered the two outliers, so now your brain has already been prepared for best and worst. So everything in between is not surprising.
Yeah, it's a terrific point. I think, and I do think it gets to the conversations we have in the course of our day-to-day work as well. We think about these things happening in the context of getting hired or getting fired or selling or these sorts of things. But every interaction is an opportunity to be doing that relationship building and be thinking about it in terms of, how do I boundary this? In 2020, I did an exercise every single day. I rated the day in terms of the day's quality, because I had this mental picture that my days were crap. My days were terrible. I was really not enjoying life. The research I did in 2020, I still have the picture of the thing. I only had 8 bad days. If you'd asked me, I would have said I had 30. I had 35,
It goes back to that question of, did you have a bad day or a bad 5 minutes that you thought about the rest of the day?
Yeah, Leah Hormozy just said that the other day. You didn't have a bad day. You had a bad 15 minutes and indulged yourself in it. you know?
And then you let that dictate the rest of your day.
That's it. That's it.
So now we're going to get to the point where I ask you my personally curated questions for you.
Cool.
Now, these are purely entertainment. I do not want philosophical, deep-rooted answers because they're off the wall. So what is one guilty pleasure song that when you hear it, you just want to turn up and uncontrollably dance, but you're so self-conscious that if you're hearing it in the car, you got to like roll up your windows before you can turn it up, or if you're out in public, you just subtly enjoy it in your head when all you really want to do is dance?
Oh, that's you suck. That's an awful question to ask a guy my age. Because all right, well, screw it. Taylor Swift, Shake It Off. I actually had to go find the death metal version of Shake It Off just to feel good about liking it.
You know, there is nothing wrong with that. I tell people all the time, I will max out my lifts when I'm in the gym,
right,
to pop music like Taylor Swift or that type of genre of music, because the last thing I need is death metal in my ears when I should be getting myself motivated to want to go move that weight.
Right. Absolutely. This is a great question. Question. I'm going to take a lot of grief when this comes out for that answer, though, because I have 3 21-year-old sons. That'll be fun conversations.
Well, I'll let you redeem it with another one.
Okay.
All right. So you said you worked in the space industry, and that is famous for overpriced parts. What is one piece that you dealt with where you just scratched your head and said, we're paying how much for what?
Okay. I'm going to cheat with the answer to this one.
All right.
Because I was a government contracting officer.
Oh, no. You can't play that card. This is past your military time.
No, well, but it's a funny story. I'll let you be the judge. So one April 15th, I get a call from my mother. And she says to me, I just wrote a $3,000 check to the government. What did I buy? And without thinking, because I was like 22 years old, I said, you bought a toolbox. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, toolbox. We had to get it custom painted with the decals put on and foam for the tools because bomb comp was coming up, competition, where the maintenance guys have to. And she's like, I spent $3,000 on a toolbox. Well, how many tools are in it? I said, no tools in it.
Just the box.
Just the box, right? That did not go well. A year later, April 15th, I was ready. She calls me. What did I just spend that money on? I said, an incubator for the base hospital for the babies, because I had also bought one of those. This was early in my career. I was buying ladders and that sort of stuff. But I think that the big thing in the space industry right now, point of frustration to me, there's $1 billion satellite sitting in a warehouse ready to launch. I could probably see the warehouse from my window. It's climate controlled. It's ready to launch. But they're never going to launch it because there's a bunch of bureaucratic stuff. So now they don't know what to do with it. So they put out this RFI saying, hey, what should we do with this satellite? So my company said,
I'm going to pause you right there.
Yeah.
RFI is request for information.
Yes.
Because there is a standing rule on this show that we do not use acronyms that are not explained.
Oh, okay, good. I love it. All right. So anyway, I'm tempted now to use acronyms like FUBAR, just to make you explain it.
You'll have to explain it.
There you go. All right. So that I think is the biggest waste of money I've seen, is just something that's sitting there. And because in good faith, the government passed a rule saying if something's over budget for more than a certain number of years, we cancel the project. Well, it's done. It's tested. It's ready to go. So now it's going to be carved up and handed off to people because it's gone from being $1 billion, good thing to just a piece of junk that needs to be carved up. That's frustrating.
And on top of that, the longer it sits in the warehouse, the more obsolete it becomes. So then it becomes not even a depreciated asset, but a depreciated paperweight.
Well, and somebody from a big defense contractor pulled me aside and said, look, the way this works is we get Congress spun up about something. Congress tells the generals they're going to do it. Then we get the first contract. But nobody in the government really knows what they want. So we go along for 3 years trying to build it. Then we run out of money. And the government says, that's okay because we didn't want that anyway now. So we get another contract to fix the thing that the first contract broke.
Wait, are you describing what we just talked about earlier with the job descriptions?
Yeah, it's just played out over billions of dollars instead of human lives.
All right. So I think that's a great place to wrap this up and and end with is we've come full circle.
Yeah, have a great weekend, folks. It's all pointless.
So I'm going to hand the floor over to you. Tell the audience where you want them to find you and what you want them to know about yourself.
Cool. Thank you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, and please follow, but also go through the effort to connect, because following is great. It makes people feel good that they have X number of followers, but go through the tool and connect. That's the thing I would ask. And it's just Steven Sopko's not a hard name to find. There is one guy who's really a lot more impressive than I am. I'm the other one. So,
Well, I'll put your link in the show
yeah.
notes.
And,
And
and
also be prepared. If you do connect with Steven, he will want to schedule time to actually talk to you.
yep.
So do not connect with him if you do not want to actually talk to him.
Well, or connect and say, I'm just connecting because you seem like a cool guy, but
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you. I'll respect it if you, because the thing I always tell people, if you're connecting on LinkedIn, it pops up hey, do you want to add a note to this? Always add a note. I'm surprised how many people don't. And just add the note saying, hey, saw you on Trevor's podcast. You seem like a really cool guy. I don't really have anything I want to talk about right now, but I'd like to keep in touch. Boom. I'll accept that link all day long, as long as you're not trying to sell me anything right away.
Oh, yeah. So you got to do the warm sell, not the cold sell. So with that, like, subscribe, and follow the show. If you're enjoying it, keep coming back, keep listening, keep downloading. There's plenty of back catalog. There's also the Patreon where you can get bonus content. And I've got some really good questions for Steven to get some really good advice out of him, begrudgingly probably. So,
Oh no, it'll be fun.
So be prepared, subscribe, follow, all the fun stuff. I'm not gonna do the stick of smash that like button. Let's hear it. Let's go. No, that's not what we do. So with that, I'll end like I always do. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Steven Sopko, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM.
Thanks, sir.